Hello friends, welcome to this session on the double helical structure of DNA or the Watson and Crick model of the DNA. The discovery of the structure of the DNA by Watson and Crick in 1953 was a momentous event in science, an event that gave rise to entirely new disciplines and influenced the course of many established ones. Here we are concerned ourselves with the structure of the DNA and the events that led to its discovery. So the key points of the discussion are: we'll be first seeing the structural details, that is the components that make up the nucleotides and the bonds which are present in the structure. After that, we'll move on to the base composition studies or the Chargaff rules and the X-ray diffraction studies, followed by the Watson and Crick model. So to begin with the structural details, so DNA or deoxyribonucleic acid is a polymer of nucleotides. So first you'll see what is the composition of a nucleotide. As you see here, a nucleotide is composed of three main components: a pentose sugar, which is always a 5-carbon sugar, a nitrogen base, and a phosphate. Here the pentose sugar, in the case of it is usually a ribose sugar, 5-carbon ribose, and in the case of DNA it is deoxyribose and normal ribose in the case of RNA. The nitrogen base, four different nitrogen base can be seen in DNA. They are adenine, which is represented by A, guanine represented by G, cytosine represented by C, and thymine represented by T. In RNA, this T will be replaced by uracil, which is represented by U. And the third component of a nucleotide is a phosphate, which is in the form of phosphoric acid. So here in the diagram you can see the difference between the deoxyribose and the ribose. So the difference is with the 2' or at the hydroxyl group which is present at the 2' carbon. In the case of deoxyribose, that is with DNA, you can see that the 2' carbon, instead of hydroxyl group you are having a hydrogen, but here in the case of ribose it is a hydroxyl group. So when this hydroxyl group is replaced by hydrogen, or it is replaced by hydrogen in the case of DNA, and hence it is called as deoxyribose, and it is normal ribose in the case of RNA. Coming to another terminology, which is nucleoside. So nucleoside is nothing but the pentose sugar, which is deoxyribose or ribose, plus the nitrogen base, any of the nitrogen base together is called as a nucleoside, or you can represent it in another manner. A nucleotide minus phosphate can also be considered or can also be termed as a nucleoside. Now, so this is so we were discussing about the pentose sugar that is present in DNA. So as you can see here, the structure of the deoxyribose. So here it is called as deoxyribose because the 2' carbon of the pentose sugar or the ribose, here the hydroxyl group is replaced by hydrogen. Coming to the other positions which is important in our discussion of DNA structure is the C1 hydroxyl group here, and the other one is this 5' carbon, which is marked there. So these are the important points in this discussion because the C1 carbon or the C1 hydroxyl group is a place where the nitrogen base is going to be bonded in this particular sugar to form a nucleoside, a pentose sugar plus nitrogen base, and at the 5' carbon the phosphate will be attached, and thus a complete nucleotide will be formed. So these are the two positions, the C1 or C1 and the 5' the 1' carbon and the 5' carbon. So here you will be noting the numbering of the carbon. Here it is represented as 1', 2', 3', 4', and 5'. So the numbering is to distinguish the number from the numbers in the nitrogen base, because primarily we'll see in the next session that the nitrogen bases, they are also ring structures, and hence the numbers are given as normal 1 2 3 etc. So to distinguish the numbers of the sugar and the nitrogen base, they have given such a numbering system. The prime does not have any other significance in this. So here the prime with the carbon atoms is just to distinguish them from the numbers in the nitrogen bases. So coming to the nitrogen bases, so here you can see the nitrogen bases. So the nitrogen bases are in nucleic acids. There are 5 different nitrogen bases. If you take DNA or an RNA as separate, there are 4 nitrogen bases. There are 2 nitrogen. The nitrogen bases mainly belong to 2 different families. They are considered as purines and pyrimidines. Purines are 9-membered ring structures, and pyrimidines are 6-member ring structures. So as you see in the diagram, they are ring structures, and you can see the numbering. They are just numbered 1 2 3 etc. So here coming to the purines, in the case of DNA, you have 2 purines with 9-member ring structure, as you can see in the diagram, in the upper set of the diagram, upper inset of the diagram. So these 2 are the purines, adenine and guanine, and the pyrimidine in the case of DNA is cytosine and thymine, and this thymine will be replaced by, or thymine, instead of thymine in RNA you will have uracil. So if you take these structures, you can see that purines are 9-membered ring structures, and pyrimidines are 6-membered ring structure. And we saw earlier in the case of the sugar, we said that it is at the 1' hydroxyl group. Our purines or pyrimidines, whatever the nitrogen base mean, when a base B, they will be bonded to this sugar at the 1' carbon or 1' hydroxyl group of the deoxyribose sugar or ribose sugar in the case of RNA. So here the particular point at which, or the particular place at which the particular bonding between the ribose and nitrogen base happens is, you can see here in the case of purines, it is N9 of purines bonds with the 1' hydroxyl group of pyrimidine, and N1 of pyrimidines bonds with the 1' hydroxyl group of the ribose sugar. So in purines it is N9, and in pyrimidines it is N1. So this is the important region where it pairs with the ribose, forming a nucleoside. So keep in mind that in purines it is N9 of purine which is getting bonded to the C1 hydroxyl group of the ribose sugar. In the case of pyrimidines, it is the N1 pyrimidine or the N1 hydrogen of pyrimidine bonds with the C1 hydroxyl group of the ribose sugar, ribose or deoxyribose sugar, as the case may be RNA or the DNA. So coming to the bonds which are present in the structure of the nucleic acid, there are both covalent as well as non-covalent bonds. There are 2 covalent bonds. They are the glycosidic bond and the phosphodiester bond, and non-covalent bond which is the hydrogen bonds. So coming to the places where we can see this covalent as well as the non-covalent bonds. So first we'll discuss the covalent bonds, the glycosidic as well as the phosphodiester bond. So glycosidic bond is a bond that is found between the nitrogen base, either a pyrimidine or a purine, and the sugar. So as we said earlier, the bonding takes place between the N9 or N1 of nitrogen base, N9 in the case of purine and N1 in the case of pyrimidine, and the 1' hydroxyl group of the sugar. So the bond is this particular bond. So what happens here is, as we saw earlier, in the 1' there was a hydroxyl group, and in our purine there was a hydrogen. So a water molecule gets eliminated and a bond is formed between and H2O is getting eliminated. So this hydrogen is of the N nitrogen, the hydrogen from the nitrogen which is of the base, either purine or pyrimidine, and OH is of the sugar. So a water molecule is thus eliminated and a glycosidic bond is formed here. So this is the first covalent bond which is between the nitrogen base and the sugar, and the second covalent bond is formed between the phosphate group and the sugar, and that happens at the 5' end. So in the 5' end, as we said earlier, you are having a 5' hydroxyl group. So this 5' hydroxyl group bonds with or forms an ester bond. It forms an ester bond with, so this is the ester bond because as we said earlier, it is phosphoric acid, and you are having an OH which is the alcoholic group or the hydroxyl group from 5' carbon of the ribose. So a bond which is formed between an acid and an alcoholic group is usually considered as an ester. So here you are having an ester bond. So this is one ester bond here. So one ester bond is formed here. So we'll see why it is called as a phosphodiester. So here you can see only one of the ester bond. Coming to the our terminology, or coming to our main portion, which is phosphodiester. So phosphodiester occurs when this nucleotide is being paired with or polymerized with another nucleotide. You can see something which is called as a phosphodiester bond, as you see in this particular diagram. As we said earlier, here we are having our this is the particular bond which is called as the glycosidic bond, and here this was our earlier discussion which we said here, this is one of the ester bond. So here when this particular nucleotide it pairs with or polymerizes with another nucleotide, you can see here the nucleotide which is seen above the particular nucleotide, it bonds here. So here it bonds. Here you can see this 3' hydroxyl group of this particular sugar is forming a ester bond with the phosphate group of the phosphate of the one of this particular nucleotide. So thus a phosphodiester. So first ester is between the ribose sugar of one nucleotide and phosphate group, that is at the 5' carbon of one nucleotide and the phosphoric acid or the phosphate group. The other ester bond is between the overlying nucleotide, that is the 3' hydroxyl group of the overlying nucleotide, and the phosphoric acid. So thus a phosphodiester bond is formed after polymerization of nucleotides to form a DNA or an RNA. Coming to the non-covalent bonds are hydrogen bonds. So hydrogen bonds are seen between the nitrogen bases. So here the nitrogen bases, usually purine pairs with pyrimidine. So as you see in the diagram, guanine and cytosine, when they pair up, you can see there are 3 positions whereby hydrogen bonds can be formed. So here you can clearly define a hydrogen bond. A hydrogen bond is a bond formed between a hydrogen and an electronegative atom. So here you can see an oxygen, and here you can see a hydrogen. So here a bond which is formed between a hydrogen and an electronegative atom is called as a hydrogen bond. There is one more criteria for a hydrogen bond, that is this hydrogen which is forming a hydrogen bond should belong to or should be paired with another electronegative atom. So if you take any of the hydrogen bond, this criteria will be satisfied. That is, a bond which is formed between a hydrogen and an electronegative atom. It can be oxygen and nitrogen. Mostly it will be oxygen or nitrogen in the case of DNA. So it is between an oxygen or a hydrogen and an electronegative atom, and that hydrogen will be bonded to another electronegative atom. So in any case you can see the same thing in the hydrogen bond. So guanine in such bonds or such hydrogen bond possibility, formation of such hydrogen bonds in between guanine and cytosine, you have three possibilities, and between adenine and thymine there are two possibilities. That's why we say that cytosine and guanine they are paired or they are linked by three hydrogen bonds, and between thymine and adenine you are having two hydrogen bonds. So this is all about the bonds which are present in the between in the nucleic acid. There are covalent bonds as well as the non-covalent bonds, which is the hydrogen bonds. So coming to the structural details, or after seeing the structural details, we are directly moving on to the elucidation of the structure of DNA. So first we are having the evidence from or evidence for the structure of the DNA. The first one is the Chargaff's rules, or usually it is called as the rules of base pairing, and this can be applied to all double-stranded DNA. So the most important clue for the DNA structure came from the works of Erwin Chargaff and his colleagues, which happened in the late 1940s. They found that the four nucleotide bases of the DNA occur in different ratios in the DNAs of different organisms, and Chargaff rules can be stated in as 4 points, which are laid down in this slide. That is, they found that there are four nucleotides which are present in the, or four nucleotide bases which are present in the nucleic acids or the DNA specifically, and they are related in different manners. So as we see here, the first one is the adenine and guanine, that is the number of purines is always equal to the number of pyrimidines, because as we said earlier, and adenine is pairing with thymine and guanine is pairing with cytosine. In such a case, the number of purines will be equal to the number of pyrimidines. The same thing, because adenine pairs only with thymine, the number of adenine will be similar or equal to the number of thymine, and guanine will be equal to the number of cytosine. So the same thing can be taken in another manner. The ratio, the number of adenine by the number of thymine, because they are equal, their ratios will be 1. The same can be applied with guanine and cytosine. The others, the total number of purines divided by the total number of pyrimidines, because purine is always pairing with pyrimidine, the numbers will be always the same and the ratio will be 1. So this is what is called as the Chargaff rule, which and these rules, or the Chargaff rules, were a key to establishing the three-dimensional structure of DNA, which was described later by Watson and Crick. So Watson and Crick also took the idea of Chargaff rule or Chargaff rules, and also the data of Rosalind Franklin, or the X-ray crystallographic data of Maurice Wilkin and Rosalind Franklin. So they combined these two data and they deduce the three-dimensional structure of DNA. So here in the X-ray diffraction studies, Rosalind Franklin and Maurice Wilkin, they could deduce the many details of the structure, but they failed to come out with a three-dimensional structure of, or a three-dimensional model for DNA, which was accounted in 1953 by Watson and Crick. To shed more light on the structure of the DNA, Franklin and Wilkins, they used a powerful method which is called as X-ray diffraction to analyze the DNA fibers. So this happened in the early 1950s, and the DNA produces a characteristic X-ray diffraction pattern, and from this pattern they deduce that the DNA molecules are helical with two periodicities along the long axis. So it is a fiber which is having a long axis. One of the periodicity is a primary one, which is a 3.4 angstrom or 0.34 nanometer, and a second periodicity in the structure is a 34 angstrom or a 3.4 nanometer periodicity. So coming to the structure, we'll discuss that in detail. So here they said that there are some repeated structures that can be seen. That was the only thing that was deduced by Maurice Wilkins and Rosalind Franklin. They found out that there are certain repeated structures in the DNA. They found that there are two repeats, and one repeat was one of the repeat was a 0.34 nanometer repeat. The other was a 3.4 nanometer repeat in the DNA. So these repeats were nothing but this 0.34 nanometer is the distance between two nitrogen bases. That means like these nitrogen bases in a single strand, or if you consider one strand of the DNA, the nitrogen bases which are above and below. So there are many nitrogen bases in the nucleic acid strand, and each nitrogen base, they are spaced with 0.34 nanometer difference. And the other periodicity, which was a 3.4 nanometer periodicity, is nothing but an entire turn of the helix. That means a 360 degree turn of the helix. It is having a length of about 3.4 nanometer or a 34 angstrom, which was the next periodicity. And it was later found out that this particular periodicity consists of about 10 base pairs or 10 bases, and the diameter of this particular DNA was found to be 2 nanometer. Diameter in the sense the distance from one nucleotide to the other. That means this particular distance was found to be 2 nanometer. The distance from one nucleotide to the other was also found to be 2 nanometers. So these are the conclusions of the X-ray diffraction studies. And Watson and Crick in 1953, what they did was they pooled the data of Chargaff rules and the X-ray diffraction data from Rosalind Franklin and Maurice Wilkins, and they deduced the three-dimensional structure of the DNA. So coming to the Watson and Crick model, so the suggestions of Watson and Crick, or the conclusions of the Watson and Crick three-dimensional model of the DNA was, the DNA was made up of two polynucleotide chains, and these chains formed a right-handed double helix. They also found that these two chains were anti-parallel, in the sense that we saw that when you take a nucleotide, it is having a 5' phosphate end and a 3' hydroxyl group. So there are two ends for a nucleotide. So when this in particular the DNA or a nucleic acid is a polymer of the nucleotide, and hence it forms when it forms a polymer or a particular strand or a chain, one end of this chain will be definitely phosphate, which is 5', and the other end will be 3' hydroxyl group. And they found that the strands are oriented in such a way that one of the strand runs in 5' to 3' direction, but the other will be running in 3' to 5' direction, and that is what is called as anti-parallel and anti-parallelity of the chains. And they also found out that the sugar phosphate backbone are seen outside the helix, or they form the backbone of the helix. So, and the bases are stocked one about the other, as we said earlier, with a distance of 0.34 nanometer or 3.4 angstrom. And they also found that the base pairing is complementary, in the sense that purine is always pairing with pyrimidines. That is, each member of these pairs are said to be complement of each other, and the distance between the base pairs or the distance between two nucleotides were found to be 0.23 nanometers. So these are the important conclusions regarding the three-dimensional structure of the DNA, which was postulated by Watson and Crick. And DNA, apart from the normal structure of the DNA, which was described by Watson and Crick, there are other forms of structures of DNA which is seen in different conditions, and two such DNA forms are A-form DNA and Z-form DNA. B-form DNA is the DNA, the structure of the DNA which was described by Watson and Crick. So we'll see what is A-form as well as Z-form DNA. So A-form DNA usually is seen, or that particular structure is seen during or when the DNA is present in dehydrating condition, when water is less in the solution. So you can see the structural difference in the diagram which is shown. So you can see when it is in the dehydrating condition, the length decreases. As length decreases, you can see the handedness is always right-handed. This is B form is also right-handed. You can see that the diameter was 2 nanometer, as we said earlier, or 20 angstrom. But here, when it shrinks, or the DNA molecule it shrinks, its diameter increases to 26 angstrom. Here also the base pair per turn, it was 10.5 base pairs per turn in a normal DNA, but here it becomes 11. And here the rise per turn means nothing but, as we said earlier, in the B form DNA it was 3.4 3.4 angstrom, which was 0.34 nanometer, which is the distance between two bases, which is two nitrogen bases below and above. But here, when it shrinks, the distance also reduces to 2.6 angstrom. Coming to the Z form DNA, Z form DNA is seen in some special type of DNA, which is either artificially synthesized, or it is also reported in natural conditions or in natural DNA. In natural DNA, it is said that this particular structures are having a regulatory function in the DNA. Coming to the Z form DNA, it is seen in DNA which is having alternating purine and pyrimidine. In such cases, the DNA will be left-handed, and the diameter means the distance between two bases. It again decreases here in left-handed helix to 18 angstrom. The base pair per turn, as you can see that in Z form DNA it is more stretched than the B form DNA. As it is more stretched, you can see the number of bases increases to 12, and also the distance between the base pairs, that is the distance between not the base pairs or the nitrogen bases, two nitrogen bases, one above and below, it also increases to 3.7 from 3.4 than normal. So this is a general idea about the structure of DNA and the different, so we talked about the different structural peculiarities of the DNA and the Watson and Crick model, and also we saw the different types of DNA, A form DNA, B form DNA and Z form DNA.